Ashley, I think you told me about something that you planned this week that did not exactly go the way you hoped it would go.
Yes, it was actually a couple of months ago, and I made a really big mistake. So our 6-year-old son, Levi, loves rides. We've taken him to the carnival a number of times, and he'll ride anything that he can get on, the roller coasters at the carnival, all the spinning stuff, everything, and I love it. I'll ride anything with him that he wants to ride. And so we got a membership to Busch Gardens, and so we took him a couple of times, and he's eaten all of those rides up, and he just couldn't get enough of the kiddie coaster. And so one day I said to him, you know, Levi, I think you might be ready for a grown-up roller coaster. He was really excited about this. And so you have to know, Levi, well, first, I had in mind the coaster I was going to take him on, but the park was getting close to closing, and it was far away. So we went to the closest one to us, which was the Verbolten. Now, what you have to know about Levi, he's not afraid of roller coasters or speed or anything like that. What Levi is afraid of is really scary and intense music and darkness and haunted things and monsters. And so if you've never been to Busch Gardens, you don't know, but Verbolten, it turns out, the ride I'd never been on before, but is German for the dark forest.
So that might not have been the best choice?
Really wasn't. We get on the ride, and he's excited because we're getting into a car. It's a cool old-fashioned car, and he's ready to go, and we go down the first hill and right around, and he's having a great time until we go into a cave. And the cave is dark, and the rest of the ride is in the black with light up, glow-in-the-dark or flashing light monsters and scary noises and music and things telling you to run and be afraid, and there's a free fall, and we get to the end, and it was he was terrified.
So everything that you thought this was the perfect first ride
certainly was not. And so, well, Jesus tells us in the gospel today, opening line is, do not be afraid, little flock. And that's such a great term of endearment, but I'll tell you, I was telling that little boy not to be afraid for 3 or 4 minutes straight, and when you're in the thick of it, it doesn't do a whole lot.
The words were not enough.
Words were certainly
There had to be
not
something
enough.
else. Yeah, it's one of those things. I suspect he probably didn't want to go on another roller coaster immediately after that.
Nope, not again.
What was it like when taking him home?
Well, he was talking about it, focusing on what it was that he'd just done. How did this thing happen? And we had to keep telling him, it's all right, it's just make-believe, and just, had to keep on assuring him it's all going to be okay.
Okay, so one of the issues in the gospel that Jesus says don't be afraid is, I think he wants us to go out. He says little flock, and little flock means a group of sheep, right? And sheep on their own can't go out and function. And so you depend upon a shepherd, and you were the shepherd that led him into into Verboten.
I was certainly not a good shepherd.
You were not, may not have been the way that it was. And one of the problems that Jesus is trying to warn us about is if we live our life always afraid, we limit our ability to truly live. Isn't that?
Right. So Jesus in this lesson is telling us to prepare, to get ready. And so we're really good at getting ready. We've gotten as humans this great ability to prepare for things and for what's going to happen. But the problem is that so much of our preparation is born out of fear. Out of fear of the bad things that are going to happen.
Right.
And so what that makes me think of is the people who were trying to raise their families during the Cold War and were afraid of the world ending at any moment.
Right? So the ones that went off and lived isolated lives, built the bunkers, tried to live in the bunkers, line up all the food they have, right?
That's right, and they survive, but you're not really living life. And so I read an article about this, and what happened is that so many of these children who were raised in these bunkers, then when the fear was over, didn't fully know how to assimilate into life. They weren't sure how to actually be in a place that wasn't so full of fear.
Right. So what our lesson from Hebrews that we heard tonight, it's written as a letter of encouragement. Hebrews is basically a long sermon which is intended to encourage people who have fallen into fear and no longer live by faith. Because what's happened is they start to see things go wrong around them, and they start to think, what I need to do is protect myself and back off from life and isolate myself. And what the sermon is intended to do is to say, people always have had things go wrong, and in every life, there's not a life that is lived where there won't be things that are bad that happen to us. The question is, what do we do about it? And the letter of the Hebrews is encouraged. It says, faith is the assurance of things that you hope for. And assurance is really an interesting word, because when it starts talking about faith, we usually think about things that we believe. I believe in God the Father, I believe in God the Son, I believe that this will happen or this will happen, and it becomes an intellectual assent to a statement of belief. Fred Buechner says in Hebrews, when they say faith is the assurance, it's not a statement of belief that I am trusting. Rather, I'm moving towards something that I have a gut. I have a gut check that says this is something that I can trust, something that I can believe in. And part of the reason why we know that is because the word assurance, literally in Greek, is the word hypostasis, which is the same word, for those of you who know your church history, in the Nicene Creed and the battles over how to define who Jesus was. The word was chosen to say that Jesus, the Son, is the hypostasis of the Father, because he is the advanced reality, the assurance that we're really dealing with the real thing. And so when Hebrews says that faith is the hypostasis, or the assurance of things we hope for, it's more like a down payment. If you want to buy a car, what do they ask? They want to know, what's your credit, right? And then they want to have you put some money down before you drive it off the lot. One way or the other, they want to know, they want to be assured that you will actually be the one who will pay for the rest. That they have an idea that they can trust, that says you are trustworthy. And when Hebrews says that faith is the assurance, what it's saying is that faith is really God's gift to you and to me to give us almost a taste of reality that is to come. To give us that gut check that says, there's something happening here that is beyond my understanding, something that is happening here that I really can put my faith in, and I can move in that direction, even if it doesn't seem to make much sense. Right? And so that advanced reality, that down payment that God gives to us, is what allows us to move toward God, even when all the reality around us says that is a foolish thing to do. God might not even exist. And yet, I have something in the back of my head and in my gut both that says I need to do this. And that's what faith that is the gift of God really is. Something that says I can do something more.
And it's that faith that allows you to, when you're faced with something that God's calling you to do that you feel in your gut,
right,
but that's fearful, you can do it because of that faith. And
sort of like you get a taste of what's to come, and therefore you can keep moving forward.
Right, that taste of what's to come. So
what happened?
Well, so Levi was really fixated on this ride. And so after a day or two of having to talk with him about this, I thought, you know what? On YouTube, they show everything. So we can show him a video of that ride, and he can see from his own living room that it's really not that scary. He can see that it's just music playing, and it's just the glow-in-the-dark painting on the walls and all of that. And so he watched it, and he watched it again, and he watched it again, and suddenly it wasn't scary anymore. And he could talk about Revolton and talk about how he was scared, but thinking about it didn't terrify him.
Well, because he'd also made it through, and he was alive.
He made it. He wasn't sure he made it through, but he did. So there was another ride that Ben and I wanted to take him on, which is Escape from Pompeii, because we thought he'd like that, the water ride at the end. But Escape from Pompeii also takes you inside, and there's some intense music, and it's thematic, and there's a statue that falls and all this. So we said, okay, Levi, let's watch it. And so we watched it, and Joel, who's our 4-year-old, watched it too, and they wanted to watch it over and over and over again, and until they knew exactly what was going to happen on this whole entire ride. And so we took them at the end of my vacation this past week on Friday. We took them back to Busch Gardens, and they wanted to ride Escape from Pompeii. And as we're going up, they're both sitting between us, and they're nervous in the back of the car, but they're reminding each other, okay, when we get to the top, that's when the fire's going to come, but it's not real fire. It's just people making the fire, and the statue's going to fall, right? But we're not going to. It's going to be far away from us, and then we'll go through. And yep, exactly. And so they're reminding themselves and us about exactly what's going to happen. And we went down, and we got the best picture of those screaming faces going down that hill. But they made it.
Yes.
They made it, and they may not want to ride it again. They were scared through it, but they made it, and they had faith in Ben and myself that we weren't going to take them into something that was going to hurt them. But also in the fact that they had an idea. They knew what was going to happen. They hadn't fully experienced it yet, right, but they knew what was going to happen. And so they had faith that it was all going to be okay. Right. And they were able to experience something that otherwise they never would have had the courage to do.
So they experienced joy
Yeah.
that they never imagined they would have because they trusted, because they'd also had a down payment. Mm-hmm. And they'd had a trusted shepherd that led them back.
Thankfully still trusted, yes.
And still trusted, that's right. And just the same as in our lesson, Abraham and Sarah had to trust God to take off on their journey. And even though it says they were as good as dead, they still laid down together and they had a baby. And that becomes the great joy of their life. In the same way, you and I can walk by faith if we're willing to trust and live life fully all the way. Amen.